I never liked Alan Wake. I tried it on Xbox 360 around the time it first released and I couldn't get into it. I also tried it on PC once I got into PC gaming and it looked a lot better, but still, I couldn't find myself to get into it. Alan Wake is considered to be a cult classic by many, and I kind of felt like people were losing their minds because I had no idea why they enjoyed this game. But I love Control, and due to that love for Control and knowing that it's connected to Alan Wake, I decided to give Alan Wake 2 a chance. Alan Wake 2 looked very different than Alan Wake 1, so I figured this time around I'd enjoy the game. So I bought Alan Wake 2, and I happened to get the deluxe edition, which came with Alan Wake 1 Remastered. I wasn't planning on playing it, but as soon as I played Alan Wake 2, my vague memories of Alan Wake 1 kicked in, and I said, maybe I should play the first one, just to at least know the story, because I'm seeing things in Alan Wake 2 that I'm pretty sure are connected to the first game. Makes sense, right? It is a sequel. I was only going to play through Alan Wake again, just so I can know the story, so I'm fully prepared for Alan Wake 2. But as I was playing it, man, I don't know, all my problems from the first time I played it, it's still there, but I don't feel negatively about it. The slow pacing, I started to understand better. The cheesy dialogue started to click.
Believed you were here on official business.
Whoa! Get back in the cell, Stephen King!
And what I thought was uninteresting gameplay actually had its own fun and nuance to it. So it's kind of weird in a way. I hated Alan Wake 1, but I don't anymore. My problems that I had before, I don't completely think they're gone. It's just, I have a new perspective on them. My main issue with Alan Wake was its pacing. It's only 6 chapters, and although that doesn't sound like a lot, these chapters are pretty long. What makes them feel so long is that most of them have this portion of the level that's meant for reflection. It's basically set during the day, and it's like downtime from the action. Younger me didn't understand this and thought that this was just filler, but now that I've gotten older and realized that Alan Wake 1 is a game that's really narrative driven, these moments are very important and shouldn't be ignored or skipped around. Although if you want to and you don't care about the story, you can. Which, side note, I think is great because a lot of games nowadays make you walk through these slow walking segments to tell you their story. Alan Wake, you can just kind of jump ahead to the exit of these points in the story so you can get to the action if you feel like it. In these daytime moments, the developers clearly want you to soak in the story, the lore, meet different characters that you really want to be able to interact with when the action kicks in, and to take in the beautiful graphics. An example of one of these moments I did enjoy was in the very beginning of the game where you go into the diner and the diner is really nicely well kept. It looks clean, something that you would typically see in a small town diner, like in a big city diner, it might be a little bit more dirty. This was very nice to look at, very realistic. And like I said, Alan Wake is a game that wants you to sit back and appreciate its graphics. That is part of the fun of the game. And if you're not prepared to play a game that wants you to do that, then a lot of these moments, like I felt when I was younger, just seem like filler. But there's really not. It's just you have to be in the moment and you have to be in that mood for this type of game. It's very important to understand that. Another level that I enjoyed was Hartman's Clinic. That one stood out to me the most because of how detailed it was and meeting the different characters in there rambling to themselves, and some of them even said little tidbits that add to the story or add to the lore of Remedy Games itself. All that was pretty cool. Again, you won't pick up on this like I did if you're just trying to beeline to the action. That was my main reason why I didn't enjoy this game when I was younger, because that's all I was trying to do. Now you might be saying these graphics don't look all that great by today's standards, but I'm not that type of person. Like, I can appreciate graphics from all different eras. And let me tell you something. I think these graphics actually look a lot better than a lot of games today, because a lot of games today think cluttering the screen with a bunch of crap means better graphics. No, it just means a bunch of crap is on my screen. I like this clean aesthetic, this clean look, and it makes sense because why wouldn't this world be clean? There's no reason. This is not like a grungy city. This is a middle of nowhere town called Bright Falls. It's in the middle of the country, and if you ever been to places like this, especially places like that where they know people are going to come tourists, they look pretty well kept together. This isn't like New York or something. It's a clear example that less can be more, depending upon the setting that you have your game in. Alan Wake knows not to do too much with its design, and I can appreciate that. And beyond just a moment to give the player a breather from the action and to show off the pretty visuals, like I said, This is very important to the overall theming of the game and the narrative, so please make sure to enjoy these moments while you can. Speaking of the narrative, Alan Wake is all about the contrast between light and dark. Alan Wake himself is in somewhat of a dark time for his career. After writing many successful books, he finds himself with some type of writer's block, unable to be creative and to come up with the next big hit. His wife Alice decides to take him to a small town called Bright Falls to unwind and escape the busy streets of New York, only to find themselves in a twisted nightmare full of darkness. There's possessed people and objects hunting Alan in the deep woods of Bright Falls. Strange manuscripts are found everywhere that appear to be written by Alan, yet he doesn't recall ever making any of them. All Alan really has is his wits, his flashlight, and he's being helped by some mysterious writer named Thomas Zane, who seemed to have disappeared in the 70s. Now, normally I don't spoil games on my channel. I don't spoil the stories, even for older games, and that's mainly due to the fact that I just beat this 14-year-old game. So if I just beat it and I will just go ahead and spoil this, I really enjoyed this story. I want you to enjoy it, and you kind of can't do that if I'm telling you what the story is. But the cool thing about Alan Wake is this. One, it's so many tiny little details that I have no time to tell you all that stuff. This review is going to be long as it is. So even after telling you basically the gist of everything, a quick little summary, you're still not going to know every little thing I know. And trust me, you're going to want to know everything as humanly possible, especially for Alan Wake 2 and even other Remedy games.
I love you.
Tell me a story, writer.
Okay.
Alan gets tricked by the dark presence disguised as an old woman. After a fight with his wife Alice, Alan finds her drowning in the lake, so he jumps in to save her. He finds himself surrounded by darkness, while psychos hunt him down in the woods. Nobody would believe the weird things that Alan has been seeing. And after learning that he's been missing for an entire week, he has to piece together what exactly happened to him. He runs into many hardships, like being tricked by a kidnapper claiming to have his wife Alice, being chased by the feds, and even being locked up in the loony bin. Despite things looking grim for Alan, he relied on his friend Barry, his intuition, and the stories that were written on the manuscripts, because it seems that anything written on them was coming true. By the end, everything comes together. Alan learns of Thomas Zane, who was a writer himself trapped in the darkness. In the 70s, Thomas lived on Cauldron Lake, in the same cabin that Alan and Alice stayed in, with his wife Barbara. Zane's wife Barbara drowned in the lake, and he used the power of the lake to write her back into existence. But he quickly realized that it really wasn't her. Instead, he brought back the dark presence. Once Zane realized the error of his mistakes, he killed the dark presence with a knife. However, he really didn't succeed. The dark presence still existed and still lived in Bright Falls. That same dark presence still contains the image of Barbara and tricked Alan and Alice into coming to Cauldron Lake and essentially repeated the same events as before.
Okay.
I wish you a good stay in my cabin. I'll come by later to check how you've settled in. And to meet your wife. I insist.
The dark presence disguised as Barbara tricked Alan into thinking that he was writing a story to bring his wife Alice back to life. Instead, all he was doing was writing a horror story to make the dark presence more powerful. So powerful that the dark presence could eventually take over the entire world. Although Alan was under the control of the darkness, his subconscious caused him to write Zane into his own story so he could escape. Zane then came in and took over the story, which explains the supernatural help that he receives throughout his journey. Zane uses an item called the Clicker from Alan's past to be used as a weapon to defeat evil Barbara for good. So Alan decides to swap places with Alice, staying in the dark place while Alice gets to escape and live in the normal world. The story itself ends on a cliffhanger with so many unanswered questions that I really understand. Like, I really get why fans for years has been waiting for a sequel for Alan Wake, because after beating the game, I was ready to jump right back in Alan Wake 2 to see what happens next. Again, it's important for me to remind you guys that I gave an extremely short rundown of the key events of Alan Wake 1. Remedy really went deep with the little details with its main story and the world it created. And now that I'm playing through Alan Wake 2, I'm piecing things together that only fans of Remedy as a whole would understand. as the game is not only a commentary of light versus darkness, it's actually a commentary about Remedy's journey in the game industry. So in short, I was wrong about Alan Wake's story. I really enjoyed it and I thought it was pretty good, but I want to touch on my gripe, which is the cheesy dialogue. Is that gone? The short answer is no.
Al, please tell me we're headed for the nearest "You're now leaving Bright Falls. Come back soon" sign.
We're going to the Anderson farm.
I knew you were gonna say something like that.
The game is full of cheesy dialogue and cheesy moments, but I realize now that that was the kind of the point. One of the biggest things about Alan Wake is a show called Night Springs. Night Springs is kind of like a Alan Wake's version of the Twilight Zone. If you're not familiar with the Twilight Zone, it's basically a show that deals with mostly supernatural and odd, weird events happening to people, and a lot of times it is cheesy. Although cheesy, it does spark thought, and I think that's the point of Alan Wake. It made me think about light versus darkness. It made me think about what it would be like for a creator to have to live through their own creation. And it also made me think about the struggles that Remedy had to go through when they had to create different things in the gaming industry and how they had to struggle with the executives trying to tell them what to do with their own creativity. All these things come to mind. And when did Alan Wake come out? What, 2010? In 2010, I was what? I don't know. Something. I was some age. Whatever age I was. I wasn't going to understand half this stuff or the nuance in it. I just thought it was dumb. And reliving it as an adult and having a more mature mind, I could see what they were going for. So yes, the dialogue is cheesy. Characters kind of like, let me be clear. The characters will tell you like what's about to happen if you're paying close enough attention. But it's just done in this fun way of like, oh, they're telling me something, but they're not really telling me something. It almost seems like gibberish to anyone not paying attention. That like this game does that a lot in the story. It does a lot of are you paying attention checks. Because if you're paying attention, you'll know what people are talking about. If you're not, then you just think they're rambling about nonsense. And it's just so much of that. And the care that they took into the story and how they wove it into the gameplay, it was great. So yes, the cheesy dialogue is there. If you don't like cheesy dialogue, you're probably still not going to like it, but I'll just compare it to another series. If you enjoy the cheesiness of a Kojima game like Metal Gear, you'll like Alan Wake. This is more westernized, if you will, but it's still the same concept. Overall, love the story. Still got cheesy dialogue, but I don't view it the same anymore. I actually really enjoy it.
Here has something to say. What's that, Al?
Ooh, I'm Alan Wake. I'm always right about everything. And if I don't get my way, I'll sulk all day long. I'm always intense and moody. It makes me very attractive and mysterious.
Now, my issue with the gameplay back in the day was a mixture of what I was told and assuming. What I was told was, because back in this time, a lot of people were comparing Alan Wake to Resident Evil, because Resident Evil is the big daddy of horror shooters, and Alan Wake is technically a horror shooter. So it was being compared to that. So I went in thinking this is going to be similar to Resident Evil. I mean, Dead Space, which is not made by Capcom, is similar to Resident Evil. So I figured this would be the same type of thing. And me going in with that expectation is one of the main reasons why I didn't like Alan Wake, because once I realized that this was basically like Luigi's Mansion with guns or something, and that's fine. But then when I saw guns are limited, it's a lot of combat at once. Like it's like non-stop combat segments sometimes. And I'm just like, yo, this is too much. Not enough interesting gameplay, not enough cool stuff happening for me. So I'm off it. But I'm going to tell you why my mind got changed. Now, on the surface, Alan Wake seems like any other third-person shooter, but Alan Wake has his own subtle mechanics that makes it stand out. The most obvious one is clearly its flashlight. The bad guys known as the Taken can only be damaged by shining your light on them. Once their guard is broken, you can unload into them, and depending upon the enemy, you may have to hold the light on them for a longer period of time to break through their defenses. The flashlight is the star of the show. Really, lighting in general is the star of the show, but that's a whole nother topic. It's very realistic as it glows and illuminates the darkness. The flashlight in combat reminds me of the red beam in Resident Evil, and it helps guide your bullets because there's no reticle on screen. Let me tell you something, having no reticle on screen is actually genius because it helps the flashlight be even more important than it would. And spoiler, Alan Wake 2, strangely, I'm pretty sure you can turn the reticle off, but by default, they have a reticle on. I'm going to go in my settings and see if I can turn it off though. Like I said, the gun selection is limited. There's only a handful of guns you could choose from, but let me tell you something. I realized what Remedy Games was doing here. Even though the gun selection is limited, this is the type of game where instead of just giving you an abundance of guns, which you can argue some guns kind of just do the same thing another gun did, but it's just a better option or it's a nuanced difference. Resident Evil does that a lot. This game hands you a handful of guns and each one has its own particular purpose. And you want to use them when you need them. It's not just use them willy-nilly, because when you're in a jam and you need something more powerful, but you ain't got it because you wasted on something you didn't need to shoot it at, you're going to feel stupid. For example, the pistol is the most common weapon in the game and it does the least amount of damage, but you're going to find abundance of ammo for it. So it's always going to be the go-to weapon when you're in a jam. There's 3 different heavy weapons: a double barrel shotgun, a pump action shotgun, a hunting rifle. Now, I didn't notice any damage difference between the pump action and the double barrel shotgun. So that was kind of a weird decision. I mean, maybe there is a damage difference. I just don't notice it. You know, I just probably didn't pick up on it. But what I could tell, you always want to go pump action. If you can find the pump action, go pump action, because you can shoot more rounds before you have to reload. And the hunting rifle is the most powerful and rarest of guns to find. You don't find it that often, and you always have like low ammo. It's never enough ammo, but this gun normally takes enemies down in 1 or 2 hits. So it's definitely something, if you need it, grab it. But I personally just prefer to have the shotgun on hand. But anytime I picked up the rifle, it did work. Now, the most powerful weapon in the game is the flare gun. Now, remember I said that the flashlight, or just lighting in general, light, is a powerful weapon in this game, or it's honestly just a powerful theming of the game. That's where the flare gun comes into play. This kind of works like a rocket launcher. Not only does it explode in this hot glow of red, it does splash damage to anyone in the area, and it just looks beautiful on the screen. There are also flashbangs and flares, which serve as the grenades for Alan Wake. The flashbangs are very powerful. They're the most powerful version of the grenades. They work as flashbangs would. They instantly destroy the Taken. Now, some Taken, you have to hit them with 2 flashbangs, but most of them die in 1. And the flare is cool because it kind of works like a torchlight, and it kind of like pushes the darkness back. It pushes the Taken back. Like, they don't want to get close to it. And it's cool because, see, like I said, you have to damage their shield by flashing lights on them. By the time once you break their darkness shield, you can shoot them. So with a flare, if you're surrounded by a bunch of enemies, you could throw the flare up, right? And then it kind of takes the shield away from all the surrounding Taken. So it works as a crowd control item. There's other type of flashlights as well that I didn't mention. You could find different variants of flashlights, and there's no reason never to upgrade these. Like, there's no downside. There's like a more powerful flashlight that takes the enemy shield down quicker, and then there's a big flashlight that you can find that just covers more of a broader space so you can hit more enemies at once, and it does just as much damage as the other flashlights, if not more. So always upgrade your flashlights. And there's other types of weapons in this game that I think is pretty cool. Like, Alan Wake's version of a railgun is like a spotlight. Like, I just think that's so cool, because when I was first playing the game, I was thinking negatively of the game. So when I was like, okay, I'm just shining a light on people, but then I connected the dots, like, this would be considered a railgun segment in any other game. So the same way how a railgun is set up, mounted, and you just sit there and shoot all the enemies down, this is different. You got to like put the light on them, and it instantly destroys them. So it doesn't work like the flashlight. The flashlight just takes the shield away. The big spotlight, that just destroys them. So it's pretty cool and creative how they try to flip the idea of a turret segment with a spotlight. I just thought that was pretty interesting. Unlike most third-person shooters that rely on cover mechanics as a defense mechanism, Alan Wake actually relies on a dodge mechanic, which triggers a slow motion effect similar to Max Payne, another Remedy project. And certain guns like the flare gun even trigger this slow motion effect that just adds more to the coolness factor of the entire game. It doesn't really do much other than that, at least as far as I could tell. It just makes the game look awesome. But, you know, the slow motion effect is kind of a Remedy thing at this point. It's just what they do. So it being here is not offensive, and it just adds to the entire experience of the game. Now, the cool thing about Alan Wake is that when I think about it, compared to other horror shooters, it's actually the weirdest one of them all when it comes to the gameplay, because horror shooters go 2 ways. Either they go the action-based, like action Resident Evil, where it's just guns and bodies on bodies on bodies of just nothing but you taking out the evil villains and stuff like that, or it goes for a more slow, methodical, trying to scare you but give you maybe some moments to do a little action. Like that's typically where we go when it comes to horrors. But this is where it gets interesting. If you ever play Max Payne, the original 2 games, this game almost feels like they took everything they learned from Max Payne, dumped those mechanics in a horror game, and didn't change anything. So Alan, he doesn't feel like Max Payne per se, but some of the mechanics are similar. Like for example, Alan can shoot without aiming. Like you don't have to hold the trigger down to aim to shoot in this game, which I can't really think of any. I don't know too many horror shooters that let you just shoot. It's not technically shooting from the hip. He's not aiming from the hip, but you know it's a similar concept. You just free aiming. He's just shooting the gun any way he wants. There's no reticle on screen like I mentioned before, which that's not uncommon. A lot of games use red beams and stuff, but this game uses the flashlight. The dodge mechanic is different. And Alan, just as a character, he feels loose. He doesn't feel slow. He doesn't feel like he's weighty. He feels like he can really move around now as much as a writer can move around, because keep in mind, Remedy is trying to keep the gameplay and the narrative connected. So he's not behaving like Max Payne, who was a cop doing bullet time or anything like that. He moves like a regular guy with a gun would. But still, I just think it's interesting how much they kept the game feeling kind of different than any other horror shooter. And that could be something that throws most people off, because if you're going in looking for something slow and creepy, that's not Alan Wake 1. But if you're looking for something with a lot of action, that's not Alan Wake 1 either. So it's just this weird middle ground. Now, I did speak about the graphics a bit already, but man, Remedy really did something special here. Now, I'm going to be clear, I am playing the remastered version, and maybe they touched up the graphics a little bit more, but remembering how this game looked on PC, it don't look that much different, so I don't think that's that. This game just looks beautiful because it is beautiful. Everywhere I look, I saw the potential for a screenshot to be taken, and everything just had this energy that this could be promotional material, or this scene could be promotional material. And of course, a game that whole gimmick is kind of based upon using a flashlight to feature enemies, the lighting system in this game is just crazy. The beautiful colors of the sky in different times of the day really had me standing there taking it all in. The level design pulls off this brilliant idea of showing you where you're headed in the distance. So as you get closer and closer to your destination, they crafted moments where clearly you're supposed to stand like at the edge of a cliff, or off in the distance you could see where you're about to go. So it makes the world not only feel more alive, but it just adds to the visual effect. Like this game is just such a beautiful game, and this is why I like this game so much. I'm a big gameplay guy. Like graphics aren't that important to me, but when you weave the graphics into the gameplay, that's when it's like you got me. So what I mean by that is, like I said, I can see where I'm going because of how clear and nice these graphics are. I can visually see, hey, the game is saying I'm going to be headed here. I can see it in the distance. I can see I'm getting closer to it. I can tell I'm making progress, and the game doesn't have to remind me with dialogue that I'm making progress. I can see it. I can see where I need to go and where I need to be. And the cool thing is, to take screenshots, I've turned my HUD off at times, and I just kind of forgot to turn it back on. And because of how detailed this game was, I never turned it back on. I didn't need to, because I didn't need the map. I can see where I was going because I can see it off in the distance. I thought that was so cool. So the graphics and the gameplay combined together. So I was getting a beautiful vista to look at, while also getting a cool gameplay experience of just relying on my vision and not looking up in the corner of my screen at a map. I thought that was amazing. And speaking of using your vision to know where you're going, light posts serve as a checkpoint in this game. And there are times where I was in the dark woods, I didn't know where I was going, and I could see creeping through the leaves and the trees and I could just see in the pitches of blackness this shiny glimpse of light. And I'm like, oh, that's a light post. I know I need to head this direction. And guess what? I would find my safe haven. I would be at a light post. I would be at a checkpoint. I can heal up and find more ammo to restock and things like that. And I just thought that was so cool. And I highly recommend, just try it out. Play the game with no HUD and just rely on your vision. It's a whole different experience. Now, one thing I rarely talk about on this channel is sound design. That's mainly because, listen, I'm not a sound guy. Like, if the sound good, as long as the sound ain't off, I ain't got nothing to say. Now, I will say there is one negative about the sound. There were times in this game I felt that the dialogue volume was not high enough. And unless I turned something else down, I couldn't, not that I could never hear what the characters were saying, or They're like TV shows and stuff like that you could find in the game. You know, I could hear it, but not as well as I would like to. So other than that, that's the only negative I have to say. But when it comes to the sound design in general, it was amazing. Being in the woods, hearing like the sound of the river flowing, or hearing like one of my favorite sounds was the rocks. Like you could hear like rocks crumbling down on the dirt, or you can hear like the monsters in the woods creeping around and whispering weird crap out their mouth, and just hearing the wind blow, and all this stuff was really creepy, and it gives you that feel that the game is trying to go for. And you want to play Alan Wake with no distractions. Now, younger me, Call of Duty me, wouldn't appreciate all these little details I've been talking about the entire review. Like little, just the finer details. Like I was in a dark room and I'm shooting my revolver and I'm seeing like the flash of the gun light up the room quickly. Like you barely would catch it, but the flash of the gun is lighting up the room. Stuff like that is cool. Alan, remember I said I turned my hood off, right? Let me tell you what's cool. Revolvers have 6 rounds in it. So you can see Alan is actually putting in the correct amount of rounds. Stuff like that makes the world feel detailed and rich. One of my favorites is how the game has TV shows and radio broadcasts. Listening to these adds more lore to the world, and some even make hints of future events. One of my favorite bits is this guy in the clinic though. See, it's a guy in the clinic who's a game developer, and you can listen to him ramble on. And most people who are not familiar with Remedy games isn't going to get what he's talking about, but I just kind of spoil it for you. He's talking about a game that he was working on, like this fictional game. And he's talking about how like the execs want mullet time and mullet time, and I'm tired of mullet time. And like, what the heck is mullet time?
They made a contribution, and then we end up with mullets in there because they think mullets are funny, but it wasn't supposed to be about mullets, and now it's about mullets. And when it's in slow motion, they call it mullet time.
That's a reference to Max Payne, because it has a mechanic called bullet time where the game slows down and it's a bunch of shooting and stuff. And he talks about the execs want everything in the game to talk. They want the toaster to talk. And that talks about how you see in a lot of games today, it's all this talking and gibberish and dialogue. And it's no good balance between the gameplay and the commentary. And just hearing, it was like Remedy was telling us what they were going through. And even now today, even though we're years removed from that, it's still important, because as I'm playing through Alan Wake 2, I'm seeing some of that there as well. I'm seeing this overall commentary and this detail of knowing Remedy's work and knowing that these guys are creatives. And sure, there are times where the creative and the execs clash because the creators want to do something crazy, expensive, and it just ain't in the budget. That does happen. But this stuff seemed more like just execs not understanding. Like, hey, we got a vision here, and I get you look at the metrics and say bullet time is what we need. But for this, we don't need bullet time. We need this. We need that. Just getting that inner look into the industry. If you've been gaming for a long time, I think on some level you would appreciate it. And it's just details like that just made my day. Now, something I did leave out when it came to the gameplay is something I have an issue with in many games, and that is the collecting. This is about to be negative because it is negative. So like a lot of games, they have a bunch of crap you could collect. And if you're a trophy hunter, an achievement hunter, and sometimes I enjoy doing that. Yeah, this is one of those, yeah. So there's a lot of manuscripts in this game. Remember I talked about that? Those are important to the story. And the cool thing about the manuscripts is that they tell you tidbits about the story that's going to happen and things that don't even necessarily get explained in the main story. So if you like the story, you're going to want to look for these. So these aren't just your typical, like, there's other collectibles that don't really matter if you don't care about the story, but these are kind of important. These are very, like, most of the manuscripts, to be fair, are right in front of you. Like, you'll find them easily, but a lot of them are off the beaten path. And I'm talking about in the most obscure, no one's going over here to find this location. And to give the game some leeway, this game did come out in a time that people were still selling guidebooks. If you're young, if you don't know what a guidebook is, it's a big book that they made to tell you where the secrets were, how to do certain things in the game, and developers purposely design these collectibles to be annoying as possible to sell you the guidebook. We live in no modern day time where someone's just going to figure out what all these are and make a YouTube video showing you exactly where to go, so it makes it irrelevant. So I don't expect Remedy with a remaster to go back and just make these collectibles to be in reasonable places, but it is something that you're going to have to deal with if you like collecting things, or you want to collect things, or that's a part of your overall experience when playing a game, doing everything possible. This is going to be an annoying moment for you. Like, I got 99 out of 100 of these coffee mugs you find in the game. The coffee mugs really serve no purpose. They're just a collectible. The thing that's annoying is that Alan Wake doesn't keep track of, how many coffee mugs are there per level. So that technically means, like, they'll keep track all the coffee mugs, but I don't know, did I miss one in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I don't know where it is. So now I have to basically play the game all over again to find one coffee mug to get a trophy. This stuff may not matter to most people. To me, it matters. And I'm telling you in my review, it annoys the heck out of me to get to the end of the game, which is where one of the last coffee mugs are, and it didn't give me a trophy because I forgot one somewhere and I don't know where it is. That's just me complaining about something that probably you don't care about. But if you do, this stuff is annoying. It's always a great experience to revisit a game I previously didn't like to find a new love for it. I typically keep my opinion on games I liked as a kid, but a few games I didn't care for, I now consider some of my favorite games. After revisiting Alan Wake, I don't consider it to be one of the best games in the world by any means, but it is a better game than I thought it was, and I'm glad I got the chance to finally see that. We live in a time where people have two opinions about a game. Either it's trash or it's game of the year. But I actually remember that there's like these steps in between trash and game of the year, and that's where Alan Wake sits. Alan Wake is a good game, maybe even great game, but you gotta be in the mood for the type of experience it's trying to deliver. It is a narrative-driven game, but it's not lacking on the gameplay. So if you like both of those things or in the mood for both of those things, you gotta go and prepare for that. But one thing's for sure, before you play Alan Wake 2, I highly recommend you play Alan Wake 1. Remedy really is trying to make kind of like a Marvel universe of some kind, because Alan Wake, Control, Max Payne, all of them are connected. And the more you know about all these games and even the inner workings of how they developed and how they were created, it can help you understand what's happening in Alan Wake 2 and maybe even future projects. Just playing Alan Wake 2 now, I'm smiling because I know what's going on beyond the obvious part of the main story. And it's just so much fun to experience that. And you have to start with at least, well, you should probably start with Max Payne, like I said, but you at least need to start with Alan Wake before you go to Alan Wake 2. Because, man, I'm telling you, this level of entertainment, only games can produce. And I don't know any other medium that can really give it to you this way. To combine this meticulous dot connecting, but then it's not like a movie. I can experience it by controlling the characters. This is something that you rarely see from most game developers. And I don't even think Kojima goes this far with his work. But that's enough. I've talked about Alan Wake. I was wrong. The game is great. The game is good. I really enjoy it. And I gotta say, man, it's just so good to finally understand what everybody sees about Alan Wake. I finally am out of the darkness. I have stepped into the light. I see what you guys see. And now it's time for me to get back to Alan Wake 2. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. God bless and keep gaming. Now that was a fun review. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and to hit that notification bell. All of that helps the channel grow. And please check out my other videos. I highly recommend you watch my Control review, and just enjoy you guys this holiday. Hope you guys stay healthy, safe, enjoy your family, enjoy some good games. God bless, and I'll see you guys in the next video.